and welcome back to another episode of the Crazy Stupid Marketing Show, the show where we talk about some of the crazy stupid things that happen in marketing and how we can do different things that aren't crazy and stupid, but maybe a little bit more meaningful to both our business and to the people who are inside that business and consuming our marketing. If you are new to the show, welcome. This is a conversation for everybody who is joining us today. And I realize that we are at a different day and time for today. So people might be like, what is going on? But yes, this is the Crazy Stupid Marketing Show. And we would love for you to get into the conversation with us. So while you see two of us on the screen here today, this isn't just a conversation for two people. This is a conversation for everyone in our wonderful topic today, which is marketing leadership. And so if you also may post about this episode for today, I was talking about how there's two sides to marketing leadership. There is leadership in terms of general leadership, people leadership, being a leader, those types of things. And then there's also something that people tend to think about in the marketing arena, which is leading your market. And so what we're going to talk about today are a lot of the people things, the human things that drive leadership in one or maybe both of those two arenas. So you never know what you're going to get on the show, but it's going to be good. That I can promise you. So before we hop into our conversation, did I say? Yes, I think I said, if you have, no, I didn't specifically say. If you have questions, comments, thoughts, perspectives, ideas, insights that you would like to share into the conversation, please put them in the comments. We would love to hear your thoughts. And a lot of times we have some really great marketing experts who are listening into the show as well. So if that is you, please feel free to share your expertise in the comments. And if you're one of those people that are like, oh, I'd really love to ask this question, but I want everybody to see that I asked that question, I'm going to encourage you to ask that question today. One, because this is a very safe place for you to ask that question. Two, asking questions is what this show is all about. The only way to avoid crazy, stupid marketing is to ask good questions. So you might as well start practicing somewhere. All right, that's all the housekeeping for today. Let's get into it. And first, we need to meet our wonderful guest today, who, after being a fan of the show for so long, was like, Tracy, it's time for me to be on the show. And I was like, of course, I'm super happy to have Andrew as my guest today. So, Andrew, tell everybody a little bit about you and why leadership is so meaningful to you.
Well, first of all, I want to take the time to thank you for having me on. Like you said, it's a little bit weird for me, so I'm trying to adjust because I am actually used to watching Tracy's show, watching her show, and commenting and hearing the great guests that you have on. So now it's kind of a little bit of a switch. Now I'm the guest, and people are going to be commenting on what I have to say. So I'm a little bit, I got the pressure on today, so we got to make it good here. I am a HR and diversity inclusion leadership guy, heavily have a certificate in HR and leadership and diversity inclusion. I love all three topics. I think they're super important to me because I definitely think, and as far as we go into the topic of marketing, I feel like communication is key to all three. And that's why I kind of feel that this conversation would mesh very, very well. A little bit about me. I am also a podcast host. I just celebrated, I don't know if anybody saw this or whatever, but I just celebrated my 1 year existence of my podcast on Saturday. So super excited about that. If you told me that I would be a year in existence when I first started it, I would have probably told you you're out of your mind. I have no idea where I'm going to be when I started. We'll see how it goes.
Well, and this is a really great example of experimentation in marketing. Because sometimes when you start these things like a podcast or a newsletter or any of these things, you don't necessarily know where it's going to go, what kind of legs it's going to have to take us for a year or 2 years or 3 years. a lot of marketing efforts had to evolve during COVID and when industries are going through difficult economic times and things like that. And so let's all take a moment to celebrate Andrew. Woo, Andrew. Because I also want you to take a moment to celebrate yourselves in these moments where you have these accomplishments, which you may be kind of like, meh. There's podcasts that have been in existence for 10 years. Yeah, there have been. And yours is on its way.
Yeah, exactly.
And if you haven't listened to Andrew's podcast, I would highly recommend it, not only because I have been on a guest on his show, but he has some wonderful, wonderful HR leaders talking about a variety of different things. So especially if you are leaning into the leadership side of this conversation, definitely check it out. Tons and tons of tips for you. Okay, so let's talk. Before we get into like marketing leadership, let's talk a little bit about like the basics when it comes to leadership. So, Andrew, can you take us back to basics here? So we're in the practice gym of leadership. What are some of the things that really matter when it comes to being the phrase that's coming to my brain is like a leader of the people, but not just a manager of people, a leader?
So I would say, I mean, I mentioned communication. That's key right there. I think a leader, we talk about innovation. And when I talk about innovation, we always say that the word fail. So I look at it as first attempt in learning. So in order to learn, you have to be innovative. In order to be innovative, you have to not be afraid to try new things. We feel like research is key as well. So there's always different ways of doing things. When I think about that, I think of diversity of thought. So one way of doing, your way of doing something is not the same way as somebody else doing something. But it doesn't mean that either person's way is the right way. It just means that you have a different way of learning. And when you communicate those ways, you come to a happy medium where you both can progress. Strategic thinking is something that I would say. Interpersonal skills, and of course, organizational skills would probably be my keys. And when I say interpersonal skills, I would definitely say building rapport. You know me, or people that don't know me, I am huge on rapport building. I don't think you can do enough of it. It's super important. I feel like when you build rapport with people, you build a community. And when you're building a community, you're building your brand. And it just goes on and on and on.
Okay, so you touched on a whole bunch of things there that are also relevant in marketing. But since you left off on the rapport building, and I love anything that's related to community from a marketing perspective, let's start there. So when we look at rapport building from a leadership as a leader and teammate perspective, or I use it. Andrew knows this about me, but if you're new to the show, you may not know this about me. I like to use sports references. And so I think about leadership both from a coach perspective, but also from a team leader perspective. So when we're talking about building rapport, what are some of actually, let's start with the mindset. Let's start with the mindset that has to go into building rapport, because I think there's a lot of people who, when we pull these things down to the task level and we say, I see this in sales quite often, is that people are just go build rapport with people. Just go build. Well, but how do I do that? So what are some of your thoughts on ways that people might be actually able to build rapport?
So first thought that comes to mind is when you are building rapport with somebody. So for example, I'm a leader. I'm walking to a meeting. I see you, Tracy, and I say, hey, Tracy, how's it going? Or how's everything? How's your day going? And I'm continuously walking because I'm going to my meeting. So there's two things that can happen there. I can stop while I'm asking you that question to see how you're really doing. Or I can be asking it in passing and continuously walking towards a meeting because I'm late. So the rapport building part for me would be actually stopping for 2 seconds, looking at you and listening with pause to hear what you have to say, to show that I'm caring actually of what is going on. If I'm late for a meeting, if I have to go to a meeting, I would say to you, okay, Tracy, listen, I really would love to finish this conversation with you. I'm just on my way to a meeting. Why don't you pass by my office around 11 o'clock and let's continue this discussion, because I'm really interested to hear how you're doing. And I want to make sure that we're helping you in every way possible. And if there's something that's keeping you or detracting you from doing what you need to do, then I want to know what it is, and I want to know how I can help you. So I would say that's probably the biggest thing about rapport building is caring, listening, and knowing when to listen, what I call with pause, or listening to give feedback.
So, Andrew, would you say though that rapport building is often getting traded away because we don't have time? I used air quotes there, folks, if you missed that, because we do have time. It's just whether or not it depends. What are we making time for? We have time. What are we making time for? And I know personally, especially I feel like as organizations get bigger, this rapport building piece tends to get lost, which is interesting when I look at it from a marketing perspective, because if we don't even have an intention of building rapport internally, how are we going to even possibly be doing that as part of our marketing, because it's not part of the culture?
It's super important. That's great points there, Tracy. So when you're talking about the marketing perspective, so when we're talking about rapport building, it's something that your company is wanting to show that that your employees are important to you, that you care about your employees, you have a family orientated atmosphere in your company, and you want to show that. So we're not using the family orientated word, but just to the wording or the way that we're handling stuff or our mannerisms around the office is super important, and people notice that. So if I'm going to take time to ask you how you're doing, Tracy, and you are telling me your story, and I'm so into it, I'm listening to what you're saying, my focus is on you. You're going to walk away from that conversation and go, wow, Andrew, I just had a conversation with Andrew. He asked me how I was doing. And not only that, you're going to go tell a couple of other employees, say, wow, I just had this great conversation with Andrew. I was so, caring, compassionate, and empathetic and authentic. He was so genuine with me. He really actually took the time to care and listen to what I had to say. It could have been about your weekend. How was the weekend? But just showing that you instantly care about that individual will go miles and miles for anybody.
Yeah. And I think that these are the things that I think people don't pay attention to when they think about external marketing, because they think external is just an outward facing thing. So I'm a marketing team and I'm talking to people over there. This doesn't have anything to do with culture, but it has everything to do with culture.
Mhm.
And when you have and I was very lucky to have a leader when I was young who actually gave me my first leadership opportunity, who was that kind of person. And while he did have a very heavy workload as VP of marketing, he never was too busy for a meeting with one of his team members. Never once. And every time that I never would have been able to tell what else was going on in his world, because if you were in his office, you were the only thing that he cared about right now. And it made a huge difference to me as a teammate, and also in my understanding of what good leadership looks like. Because regardless of whether this is in a marketing department or leadership of any kind in an organization, this is the being seen component. And when you are seen as a person, it makes you want to see others. And when you're the marketing team, folks, who do you need to see? You need to see the customers, right?
Right,
It is your job as a team, or maybe as an individual, if you're a one-person team, to talk to all of your ideal target audience.
right.
And if you are feeling unseen and just ho hum and like, oh, well, I'm gonna come sit at my desk and no one's gonna notice all the hard work I did again today. Or on the flip side, I've had managers who like give you expectations, and then every time you meet them, they like never notice, and you're just like, oh, okay, well, maybe I won't bother to try and like exceed expectations, which I was never very good at. It's not part of who I am. But that leadership makes a big difference.
Sure
and I
does.
want to also like, because when we get to the role of leader, let's talk about the role of leader for a little bit, because I think a lot of times, and I've experienced this myself, and maybe it's self-inflicted, but we're kind of accountable for things, right? So then we make ourselves accountable. And if you're a very accountable person, then you start to put a lot of pressure on yourself for you to perform, and that the department's performance is based on you being able to perform. You're supposed to have the answers. You're supposed to keep cool. You're not supposed to show that you're emotional or any of these things. And well, I think we're trending away from that in a leadership component. It's been like a pretty standard way of corporate leadership anyway in the past 40 years. And so what are some of the things that you would recommend to an individual leader? So not a leader trying to like impact the people yet at this moment, but a leader trying to just take a moment to give themselves the space to be human. Do you have any thoughts or recommendations in that arena?
Well, first off, you said there before about giving information. So the first thing I would say is definitely don't give any information that you don't know. Definitely seek out if you don't have the answer, don't give improper answers. Make sure that you're giving the correct answers. And if you don't have the right answer, tell them and be honest. And you mentioned the word vulnerable. Be vulnerable and let them know. Say, hey, Tracy, I don't have the answer to that. However, I'm going to find out that answer for you, and I'm going to get back to you on that. And once you do, you go to see them. But if you haven't heard anything in a couple of days, or you don't have the answer, that communication thing steps in there. Say, hey, Tracy, just want to let you know I haven't forgotten you. I haven't heard anything back on your answer, but I am working on it. I just want to let you know that you are not forgotten. As far as the leadership aspect goes, I think it is definitely super important that we target, like when we talk about, like you mentioned before about websites. So I think a lot, because you're in marketing, years back, people were saying, okay, we need to put mission, vision, and values on the website. You got to have it on there. So people had it on there. They put it on there. But I've been actually talking to a lot of people. I've actually been doing a lot of research on this. And there's a lot of companies out there that don't actually even know what their mission, visions, and values are on their website, or they don't believe it. So we're talking about before about building rapport. If you are a company that has a great culture, then it doesn't have to say the word culture, but you got to definitely have that in your mission, vision, and values. And you got to for sure believe that wholeheartedly. Every person on your management team has to wholeheartedly believe that culture is super important to the environment of the company, because I feel like leaders, they have a responsibility. So a lot of people use this word toxic, and sure, it's toxic. There's toxic workplaces. I don't use that word toxic. I just find that word icky. So I will say unsafe work environment or workplace harmony. Those are two things that I will use. And those describe what type of environment the workplace is. So if it's an unsafe work environment, that means that it could be you're not getting along with your boss, you're not getting along with coworkers, you don't like the workload, you just don't feel like you are. I always say, Tracy knows me for saying this, you don't feel like you're seen, heard, valued, or understood. So you work your way and you just feel like, okay, well, I'm going to, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I got to figure something out because I'm just not happy. And I hate coming into this place every day. So it is the responsibility of the leader to make sure that the employees have a safe work environment so that when they go home, they don't have in the back of their head, oh my God, I did this, or oh my God, I did that, or I'm going to get in trouble for this tomorrow, or whatever. That they are able to go home, because we don't spend a lot of time with our families, but the time we do, we need to be able to enjoy it. And that's their job to make sure that we are enjoying our times with our family.
Is it? Because I feel like I agree with you, but I just feel, I think it's interesting because I've been in leadership positions and I don't know that I would say, like, I mean, I feel like I'm a people person and I've always tried to create safe spaces and everything for my employees. I don't know that I've ever thought about it from the fact that they deserve to have a peaceful home life. So I'm going to create this type of environment in the workplace.
Right.
I think that's a really interesting way to look at it. And I also think that from all of the pieces that you shared there, that there was something that jumped into my brain, which is storytelling.
For sure.
And storytelling, of course, is huge when it comes to marketing because we're out there in the world telling stories. But this skill is equally important when we're talking about mission, vision, and values.
Absolutely.
Because how I've seen that mostly executed is that we write a thing. Well, the leadership team writes it, right? Or maybe the CEO by themselves writes the mission, writes the vision, and then maybe the leadership team works on the values. And then we put it somewhere, right? We publish it. We publish it on the website. We put it on our wall. We make our employees memorize the words, but we don't actually do any storytelling that helps people understand what it means. And so I see the specific, I mean, I was going to say I see it specifically in one of those arenas, but that's not true. The lack of it exists in all of those arenas because values, I use this example all the time, right? Cares about people. What does that mean to you? What does that mean to me? And even though we are very similar in our thoughts about these things, we might have a different definition of what it looks like to care for a person.
For sure.
And so I might watch you doing something that you believe is caring for a person and me think, oh, look at that. He doesn't care about people because it's not my definition of cares about people. And equally when it comes to mission and vision, I like, these are storytelling pieces, folks. Like if you were going to say, like, I always think about a mission as like a mission to Mars.
Right.
It's like, we got a lot of stuff we got to do to get to Mars. Right? It's going to take a whole bunch of people doing a whole bunch of things that are in their own arenas of expertise. And that's all going to have to come together. And we have to have all of those pieces in order to go to Mars. And from a corporate perspective, when we're talking about visions, which is even bigger than a mission, right? Like we lack that storytelling zhuzh that like makes people want to go on that journey with you. And so regardless of whether that lack is existing if it's existing internally, it's existing externally, right? And we also think that like, oh, we'll just publish these things on our website and then the whole world will know them about us. You can write whatever you want on a website, folks.
Sure can.
Doesn't make it true. And people more and more are becoming skeptical of what people write on their own website. I can tell you, I can write, I have done this. And I've done it in my clients' own words, like when they speak them to me and then I write them down. But people write their own testimonials all the time. We go to people's websites, we look at testimonials, unless you're actually having a conversation with someone who's a referrer or a live testimonial giver. People can write anything. And so it isn't about just creating and documenting it. It is about knowing the story, number
Mhm.
one,
Mhm.
and then being able to tell the story and invite people into the story,
Mhm.
invite your teammates into the story. Do you think your marketers are being successful creating social media posts if they're not invited into the mission of your business?
Mhm.
No.
Mhm.
Right? Come on, folks. This is the
Mhm.
crazy, stupid part of the title of the show. um, and this is, I was super excited to have this conversation because these are not just like leadership principles. These
No.
are human principles, and
Right.
humans are marketing to humans.
Right.
And so all of these principles are the same. So storytelling, rapport building, you mentioned communication a couple of times, which is, I mean, marketing is your external communication engine.
Right.
But I also, okay, let's talk about this from a communication perspective for a minute, because I think this is similar also to between leadership and marketing. Communication. Would we, okay, so my brain is saying, okay, so there's one-way communication and two-way communication. But is that really true? Or is that more just in the intention? Like a one-way communication is me telling people stuff, but I have no intention of listening to anything. I'm
Right.
just in telling mode.
Right.
But my brain is also telling me that real communication is always two-way.
Mhm.
That I can't understand what you heard me say
Right.
if you're not allowed to
Right.
say something back to me.
Mhm. Mhm.
So what are your thoughts on that, like one way versus two? Because I think a lot of times too, from a leadership perspective, people think like, especially from a CEO, I'm going to stand up at the front of a room during a town hall and I'm just going to tell the people the things.
Mhm.
That's one-way communication. A digital ad is one-way communication.
Right.
You're not talking to anybody. So is that really communication?
Well, there's different ways of communication. You're absolutely right. So, I mean, you mentioned before about certain people thinking a certain way and other people's thinking a different way. I talked about diversity of thought earlier. So when we're talking about, first of all, when we're talking about rapport building, the way that a leader would talk to me would not be the same way that a leader would talk to you. But that is the job. So when I was talking earlier about making a safe work environment, that is meaning that their responsibility is to figure out how to talk to each individual, what things are important to them, what things are not important. So what things are important to Tracy, what things are important to Andrew, trying to find a little bit, get to know them. Maybe they had a gathering on the weekend or some their kid's birthday. Oh, how did the kid's birthday go? So just kind of things like that I think people will kind of look and say, oh my God, he actually cared. He asked about my kid's birthday. Like, so that's huge. As far as a communication factor, I think I mentioned a little bit earlier, you're communicating. So if you're like in a town hall or you're in front of all your employees discussing a new process or something new that's coming to the company, you're communicating it to give them information, but you're just communicating. You're not looking for them to give you an answer. They may have questions or what have you, but you're not looking for them to give feedback. And that's probably not the best time to give feedback, is when you have a huge room of people and say, probably the worst thing to say would be, I'm not sure what to do about this. What do you think? And you got a room of 50 people. Well, chances are you're going to get 50 people's different opinions. And that's probably not the time or space to do that. I would probably do that maybe in a smaller group or more individually to try to find out to communicate what they were looking for, understand what their needs are, and try to figure out what the solutions would be. So I'd say that's probably you're listening to communicate, you're communicating the information, but you're also other people are maybe communicating with you and you're trying to figure out, am I giving feedback or am I just listening to listen?
Yeah, and I think that is interesting because I feel like innately in my definition of communication, my own definition of communication, which are these values that we should talk about so people know each other's definitions, that there is a listening component associated with that, right? So I am speaking, not actually communicating to you unless you're listening.
Right.
So there's like two people who are
Right.
involved in that. And so then based on what you shared, I was like, okay, so then there's a difference between like an announcement. I'm going to stand up here and make an announcement. Or I'm having a conversation with you, which then to me, conversation is a word that dictates more of that back and forth. Like I'm inviting you in and I expect you to speak. It's like the conversation we're having right now. Also, reminder to anyone who might be watching in the audience, if you'd like to share your thoughts in this conversation, we would love to see them in the chat. So just a reminder, I know we're talking about a lot of great stuff, but I'm sure you have great stuff that you have in your brain or questions that you'd like to ask as well. Conversation. See what I did there? Always tying things together. But again, these are this is the power of having these types of conversations where it's fully exploratory. I'm not trying to convince you that your definition of communication is wrong. You're not trying to convince me that my definition of communication is wrong, but we're trying to understand, how are you seeing this? How am I seeing this? Where might we be having issues in our language because we're actually both using the word communication, but the definition isn't quite the same to us. So how do we get and the next thing? And this is also equally relevant, again, from the marketing perspective, is we use our words and we assume they mean the same thing to our clients as they mean to us. And I remember having this scenario once where I worked at a company that distributed phone calls. And we were supposed to make calls in this area of New York, and the phone lines were down. Phone lines were down. Emergency phone calls were not getting through the telephone lines. I had the client call me and be like, "The calls are not going out," and I was like, "Nope, no," and they won't until the priority calls, aka people who need an ambulance, are going out first.
Oh my God.
Those are out there, and we will talk about this. And it was really interesting to me though, because that was something that was like urgent to them. It was like so important. And to me, one, I know there's nothing that can be done about it, right? I can't go and like erect a bunch of telephone poles in a different country. I'm pretty sure that would be illegal actually. So like I can't fix this problem. If we just take a breath, then we'll all realize that this isn't a problem. But it's a reminder that like, what is the problem for me, or what's creating an emotional experience for me isn't necessarily the same as what's creating emotional experience for you. And this is important especially if you're looking at this from a like public relations perspective, which is a part of the marketing puzzle. How are we telling those stories to the public? Because sometimes stuff is going to go wrong. And there's, talking about leadership too, there's this ownership of that, right? Okay, stuff went wrong. Stuff went wrong that I can't control. I don't control the weather. That'd be cool if I did. I live in Canada and it would be great if I could control when it's minus 45 and when it's not. So I can warm up my dad's car and get it off my drive. Which is not currently a problem, just in case anybody's wondering that, but it was a problem a month ago. We can't control all things. We can't control all things as marketers. We can't control all things as leaders. I remember my great boss that I was sharing about earlier, he used to always say, "We're not saving babies. We're working in a marketing department, in a marketing company that provides marketing services to people." And he would always say that. We're not saving babies. If someone's postcard goes out a day late, it's not going to matter one little bit. And yeah, it might be stressful to make sure that stuff can go out, but like at the end of the day, no one is dying because this didn't happen. can give people credits. We can redo things. We
Right.
have all the power to do
Right.
this. Does it cost money? Sure. But like it's not dying babies. It's going to be fine. And I use that phrase. One, I always thought that phrase was so funny because my mom was actually a neonatal nurse, so her job was to save babies.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, oh yeah, I use that phrase so many times in my career because we're not saving babies. If this happens tomorrow, it's going to be fine. If this version of the podcast doesn't get recorded today, it's going to be fine. If we sent out a bungled up email with bad links to our email list, it's going to be fine. We can send another one tomorrow with good links. Right? Like, how many people have experienced that? I know, I feel like in the last month, I've got at least a couple of them that were just like, oops, sorry, we bungled this up. It's fine. And if you have that kind of rapport with a person, then it's less devastating when you make those mistakes, because they're gonna happen. We are humans. We are not perfect.
Yeah, for sure. And I've had leaders who have told me, say, hey, Andrew, one particular came to see me and said, listen, if you have anything, and this was actually day one, right from the onboarding, day one in the onboarding meeting, or before we started my training, said, listen, if you have anything, if something happened, if you made a mistake, it's okay, but come and see me and we'll fix it. But don't try to fester it or try to fix it and then come back and, and tell me like 2 days later. If it's happened, come see me and we'll fix it, because everything can be fixed. So when I talked about innovation earlier, that just allowed me to say, okay, well, obviously I'm not going to say, okay, well, who cares if I make a mistake? But that wasn't my mindset. But my mindset was a little bit more relaxed, because I'm like, okay, well, I can relax and I can learn the processes and the ways that they do things here, and if I make a mistake, we can fix it and we can learn from it. But I was never put in a situation where I was stressed, where like, oh my God, if I make a mistake, I'm going to lose my job here. That's not the type of atmosphere that you want to have for your employees. You want to have them feeling that their questions are welcomed and their concerns are welcomed. And because your concern, you said before that we did, we don't have to agree on everything. So the things that a leader understands is that what is a concern to me is not a same concern that for Tracy. But just because it's not, we're not have the same concerns, doesn't mean that one is less than the other. We have to determine that whatever it is, it's important and we need to figure it out and fix it.
Yeah. Well, and I like you mentioned innovation again, and I want to just kind of bring that back in, because no innovations ever happened without a mistake. Actually, I'm pretty sure, what was it? Penicillin was created by mistake. There's a lot of things, a lot of good things, probably a lot of bad things as well, but there's a lot of good things that have been created by mistake because people were experimenting with things. And we've done episodes on marketing innovation and the necessary mindset and intention behind that in order to make that possible. And you use the word growth as well, right? And that's one of the things that I love when we think about leadership and kind of like growing into a leader. If you have a desire to be a leader and you don't quite see yourself as a leader today, there's growth. And in a brand, there's also a growth and an evolution, right? We grow and evolve, and our people change, and our market changes, and the economy changes, and the climate changes, and like all of these things change and evolve, and our companies don't stay stagnant within that. And so from a marketing perspective, it's sometimes very interesting to me because we want to just keep our marketing program the same as it's always been. And there's a lot of people, this is very similar to the like remote work scenario, which we're not going to touch on today, but people want to go back to work, right? Like we're always in the office, so we're like back to the office, right? And same thing with marketing. Let's go back to doing all the things that we did before, except the economy and the environment is not the same as it was before COVID.
Right.
There's distrust for certain marketing methodologies. In-person events have evolved, so they are not gone. In-person events are not gone, but they have evolved into something different. They are not the same fuddy-duddy trade show with your booth and your video with the loop and everything. They're not the same, and you can keep doing it the same, or you can evolve with the times.
Right.
And whether you're looking at that from a brand perspective or you're looking at that from a leadership perspective, to ignore the fact that these things have evolved is folly. Okay? We cannot go back. And this is something I was thinking about this again earlier today too, and it drives me nuts because Disney is supposed to be one of the most creative organizations in the world. Earlier or last year, forced their people back to the office because that's where people are creative. I'm like, seems like a pretty broad general statement. That's not necessarily true. And it was just really interesting because earlier today I was in a conversation about the concept of reimagining things. So we were talking about reimagining community. But when I think about innovation, I thought this was a great word. And this reimagining, because it takes us beyond where we are right now. It takes us beyond where we have been. Right. So we can go back to what we had before. But if we think about it, we're really super jazzed about what we had before, or what we had before was fine. Because now if we're going back to fine, I'm going to go on to Team Reimagine, because I feel like we could reimagine this in a much more powerful way where it's better than fine. And what if, let's take this from the like relationships perspective, okay? From a leadership or a marketing perspective, talking about our relationships with clients, what if those were more connected, more powerful, more empowered? Yeah, Freeman is agreeing with me. For an imaginative company, Disney struggles with being agile. And it's a big company, right? Bigger companies in general have a bigger problem being agile. Smaller companies tend to be a little more agile, but I've also worked in small companies that you would think would be agile. But that's why, again, I bring this back to mindset, right? We have, there's this growth mindset is kind of the general phrase that people will use for it. But we all want to convince ourselves that we're in a growth mindset, but are we actually? And can we answer that question truthfully and say like, wow, no, I'm really stuck in this old way of doing things. I would like to have a growth mindset, but I don't know how. Yeah. Then we've entered the realm of having a conversation and we can actually dig into it a little bit.
I love when you said reimagine, and I love the growth mindset. I love all of that stuff. It just makes me think like when we're a leader, I feel like our responsibility is, so you mentioned something earlier that kind of caught my attention when you said that, you know, we're developing people to become leaders. So that is, you know, in some cases, but there are some cases where not everybody wants to be a leader. So, you know, if we're talking about a marketing department, you know, Susie and Jane are working for the same company in a marketing department, and Tracy is the leader of that department. Well, she's got to figure out, okay, well, which one of those was looking to become a leader, and which one of them is okay just doing the marketing stuff behind the scenes. Because it's okay to do that. But some people, I've had some conversations with some people, and some people feel like, oh, it's not okay. You know, everybody should be a leader. And I don't believe that. I think because I think if everybody was a leader in a company, then the other stuff,
nothing would get done.
Nothing would get done. So you need to figure out who wants to be the leader, who is okay being that everyday thing, because leadership comes with a lot of stuff. And leadership means company cell phone. Leadership means a laptop. Leadership means that if an email comes in at 8 o'clock at night, that it's a good chance that you're going to have to answer it. So some people don't want that. They're okay to do their 9 to 5, go home, have supper with their kids and their husband or wife, put the kids to bed, bath, homework, and then relax, whatever they decide to do, watch a television show or whatever. They're okay with that. The other people, not because they want the extra work, but they thrive on that because they love that they are part of the decision-making process. So that just comes into tails. So it's just a matter of figuring out who wants what.
Well, and I always think it's as simple as asking people. Now, I also don't think that people know for sure until they have experienced it and can say yay or nay. Which again, one of my great boss gave me the opportunity to lead the team risk-free for 6 months. He was like, see leadership potential in you. If you'd like to give you this / team lead role. If you like it, you can keep going in that direction. If you don't like it, you can go back to your other job and it's totally fine. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is the biggest win because I can try it. But if I don't like it, it's not like I've left my old job behind and I have nothing to go back to.
Oh, for sure.
I have something, a fail safe. And so in my career, I did that for multiple people from a leadership perspective. It was like, try it. Here, go try it. Lead the team, see how it goes. Quite honestly, in the scenarios I experienced, people decided not to stay in a leadership role. And I think that is because leadership is about people. It's actually not that much about doing tasks anymore. It is about empowering people. It's about listening to people. It's about observing people. It's about helping people. It's about coaching people. It's about people. And I've probably shared this on the show before, but my husband, who is an analyst, him and I were having a conversation in the car, and he was having a problem with a teammate of his. And he was like, these people problems, I just don't like spending mental calories on them. And they're like, analyst brain likes to spend mental calories on analysis.
Right.
And I was like, this is so interesting because that people problems or challenges or whatever you want to call them, opportunities, are things that I love to spread my mental calories on. Because I'm innately curious about what is happening with that person? What could be causing this conflict between these two parties, right? Why am I responding like this? This is something where I have a natural predisposition to be curious about the scenario.
Yeah.
And when we can find that match and empower people in the arena that they match,
right,
also give them the opportunity to say hey, I equally need a powerful leader and somebody who can create beautiful video content, right? Well, it's just an example. My marketing program is based on video content. I need a good leader and I need a good someone to do video content.
Right.
And so again, I have probably extreme opinions on the financial differences that people want to provide or the financial value that people assign to each of those different tasks, because they are all important. And again, conversation for another episode, because I see that we are almost coming up on our hour and I assume that would be the case. But we need all of those people. And so, yes, we need the people who are matched to leadership to be leaders. And we need the leaders, for good leaders right now, to pay attention and give those people the opportunity. And equally, this is something that I really champion within marketing teams, is that no, we can't all be the leader. We can't all be the VP 5 years from now, right? We can't. And while we are programmed to believe in this hierarchical, which I can never say, hierarchical hierarchy, the hierarchy that we're supposed to climb and get to the top of, because then we are the champions. We can't all climb that at the same time, because I need doers to do things as well. I can't all want you guys fighting for my job later, right? Also because I love my job and I would like to keep this job and I'm really good at it. And there's a whole complexity there. But when you have resources assigned to doing things that are meaningful to them and they can see are meaningful to the business, so the leader can see that they have the time they need. Every time you were using your examples, Andrew, I just thought, like, so what about that leader who has to manage 150 people? You've now created a scenario, even if that person wanted to stop and talk in the hallway to somebody, they can't, because they can't do that for all 150 people. It's not possible.
No, but they can't talk to people individually, but they can do, they may not be able to do it every day, but they might be able to do like a team check-in, or a weekly or a monthly check-in with people. But I think it's a check-in, right? So people don't check mark like, oh.
And some people don't actually want to be checked in on that often, right? They just want to do their work and get it done. And this is the thing that it takes. Like, you have to pay attention, right? You have to pay attention. Be like, that person is just run. And I'm going to like take them for coffee once a month. And that's going to be our touch base. And then, like, I've had employees where I need to have at least a 5-minute conversation with you at the beginning of every day, because that is going to be the best way for us to be aligned with what is going to continue to happen. And it doesn't have to be the same, but from a teammate perspective, that doesn't necessarily mean that it feels like you have less support.
No.
If you have the support that you need.
No.
And the support that you need is something that a leader, I don't like to use the word should, but there's opportunity for you to observe.
I think employees, Tracy, all they want to know is, you just talked about check-in, and some people don't want to be checked in all the time. An employee, all they want to know is that option is there, that those people are there, that you're not like on an island by themselves, that it's available to them if they need it. And if they need to go and talk to somebody, that person is there. The door is open. That is the most important thing to somebody, is knowing that.
Yeah. And this is, Freeman has a comment on this topic. Gary V is bullish on the fact that making time for this is a key point. And yes, it takes time, but it's important for that time. Mm-hmm. He makes time to meet with the majority of his team daily. Yeah. There were lots of time. The word time was used many times.
Yeah.
I'm going to share my favorite quote about time, which I'm pretty sure I made up, but I might have stolen it from somebody. I don't think I did, though. You have as much time as you think you have, is what I always say. So if you think you have time to stop and have a conversation with each of your teammates, then you make time for that. If you don't think you have time, then you will fill your time with other things, and it will manifest that you do not have enough time to have those conversations. And so I come back to mindset on this, because the equally relevant on the time we spend doing marketing things that may or may not have value associated with your business. And I'm going to speak specifically to entrepreneurs in this scenario, because entrepreneurs are doing a lot of marketing things. I'll use air quotes again on marketing, that aren't doing anything for the business. That's not helpful, right? You're spending your time on a whole bunch of useless things. And so what we need to do is stop spending our time on useless things and start spending our time on meaningful things. Right. And if we prioritize spending our time on meaningful things, whether that's in leadership or marketing leadership or marketing in general, then that is where we're going to be the most impactful with our time.
Right. I will share this story with you as we close out, Tracy. I had a friend of mine and I'll try to make it as quick as possible, this story, but a friend of mine was working for a company. There was probably about 15 people on her team. Her leader came in. Normally, always upbeat. Came in on this one particular day, was distraught. You could just see it in their face. Bad day, not in the best frame of mind. Normally, he would say, "Good morning, everybody." He just walked in, and everyone said good morning to him. And he's walking towards the office, and he just stopped for a second, and he turned around and he said, "Good morning, everyone. I just want to let you know that I'm going to be very vulnerable with you this morning. I haven't had the best day today, or best start to the day. So I need a half hour just to recoup and just to get myself replenished on on the day and the tasks at hand. So if you can just give me a half hour just to unwind, I promise you that I will have any discussions with anybody that needs to have a discussion or anything that they need to talk about. I will have it after that. But if you guys can just give me that half hour, that would be great." And he closed his door. And my friend told me everyone looked at each other, went, "Oh my God, he was so vulnerable. I, we just so admired him before. We admire him even more now." So the team just, I think it's like, when you think of the Grinch, like everybody's heart grew like 12 inches bigger. I think everybody just realized, like, oh my God, like this guy is such a great leader. Their minds just blew of how even more of a great leader that this person was. So it's just important that, again, we use communication. He communicated what his situation was, and everybody loved his vulnerability.
Well, and this is the thing that I know there's a lot of fear when it comes to vulnerability in marketing as well. Everybody wants to look perfect and pristine when they're presenting something to the world. And the fact of the matter is, in that scenario, that human just became more lovable.
Mm-hmm.
And it
Mm-hmm.
actually makes me want to help you.
Yeah.
Whereas you put on this like tough sheen and be an ass and just like walk to your door and like slam it and don't answer calls for half an hour, doesn't
Mhm.
make me want to help you,
No.
right? Like if you just tell me the truth about what is going on, I believe that most people in this world want to be helpful. I
Yeah.
want to support you in your journey.
Yep.
And you just gave me enough, not too much, but you gave me enough to know that I can actually help you in this scenario.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just always about the leader helping the people, but it's how the people can support the leader. And then you grow that perspective to an ecosystem size.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're talking about how customers support a brand.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Mm-hmm.
The human relationship that is based on is the same.
Right.
It's the same experience. And so when we get now, I'm not gonna tell the companies that I work for to go do digital ads about all of the mistakes that they've made with their clients, right? That's not the point I'm making. The point is that relationship between the humans is the same. So if we're talking about building rapport with a brand, we're looking at the same type of things as what that leader did to build rapport
Mm-hmm.
with his team.
Mm-hmm.
And those things are vulnerability is one of them. So we can't completely eliminate that. Especially when we're at the point where we're having one-on-one conversations with people. We're
Yep.
a real human or we're going to show up like a robot. I mean,
Yep.
I'm on the side of authenticity every time.
Absolutely. And the other thing too that we have to remember too is that, we know how we're all working. We all been in offices. We know how things go. Somebody comes in a bad mood right away. Everybody, they walk away to go get coffee, whatever. And what's wrong with him? What's wrong with her today? What's happening with him? So they just have people start whispering, having these conversations. So right away, his rapport building, he eliminated everything right away, right off the bat. This is what's going on. This is how I'm feeling. He didn't go in any detail of what it was. He just said, "I'm having a bad morning." So when he closed his door, there was no like, well, okay, what was it? Or like, there was no conversation of what it could be or why is he in a bad mood. Like it was so like such a great move that everybody just okay, let him be. We'll talk after. And they just started and they moved on to their day. They had their little conversations, meetings, whatever. Everything continued from that point.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's a great example. I'm really glad that you shared them, and we could continue, but we have reached our hour. So, Andrew, where is the best place for people to find you if they're interested in learning more about the Let's Be Diverse podcast, or they're interested in learning more about your work in the leadership HR DEI arena?
Well, I would just say the best place to find me would be LinkedIn. So it's Andrew, Andrew, and the last name is Stoute, Stoute. I always like to say stout beer, but with an E on the end. So that's probably the best way to find me. And everything is there. The link for my podcast is on there as well. Currently, there's about 65 episodes there for you to choose from to listen to. So yeah, that's probably the best way. I love to meet people. That's where I met Tracy, and I love to meet people, have conversations with them like this. I'm always open to it. I'm huge again, like I said, on rapport building.
And Andrew makes a great point, friends, because if you are listening to this episode and marketing leadership is something that is important to you, either from a becoming a marketing leader perspective or from a leading the market perspective, this is not a 60-minute solution for you. You can't just listen to this wonderful conversation, as many great tips as came up today, and have all of your answers to eliminate crazy, stupid marketing from a leadership perspective. So I recommend that you do is connect with the peeps. So if we're not already connected, connect with me, connect with Andrew. Freeman was also in the chat. Great to see you, Freeman, from Japan. He's in Japan right now. Get into conversation with each other about what marketing leadership looks like for you, what it means to you, what drives it, what has been unsuccessful, like all of the things that allow us to explore what is going to work and what isn't going to work for ourselves and our organizations. So make sure to get into the conversation, but not just to get there, to stay in the conversation. With that, Andrew, thank you so much for sharing your wonderful expertise with us today. Thank you, everyone, for joining us in the chat. If you're watching this on replay and you have questions, feel free to pop them in the chat and tag one of us. We'd be happy to come back and answer those. And until next time, everybody, permission to do you.